Two men, more feared than almost any other human beings alive. They had tortured athletes for losing games. They had murdered people at private parties. They had run one of the most brutal regimes on the face of the earth. And they answered to no one. Not the law, not the courts, not even God. And then on a blazing July morning in 2003, inside a crumbling house in northern Iraq, they ran out of time. If you've never heard the full, unfiltered story of what happened to Uday and Qusay Hussein, and what the world saw when that leaked morgue footage surfaced, stay right here, because this story goes far deeper than you think. Before we go any further, if you're new to Timeless World, hit that subscribe button right now. We don't sugarcoat history. We tell you exactly what happened, exactly how it went down, no matter how dark it gets. And hit the bell so you never miss a single drop. Let's get into it. The boys who grew up in a palace of fear to understand how Uday and Qusay Hussein died, you need to understand how they lived. Uday Hussein was born on June 18, 1964. His brother Qusay arrived 2 years later on May 17, 1966. These weren't ordinary kids growing up in ordinary homes. They were raised inside fortified compounds surrounded by armed guards, intelligence officers, and men whose loyalty was bought with blood and fear. Their father, Saddam Hussein, seized total power on July 16, 1979. Within days of becoming president, he called a meeting of top party members and had them accused of betrayal right there in the room. Many were arrested, many were later executed. Saddam reportedly had some of the condemned men shot by their own colleagues to force shared guilt. Well, the message was unmistakable. No one is safe and no one is innocent. This was the world Uday and Qusay were raised inside. Fear wasn't something they read about. It was the wallpaper of their entire childhood. Two brothers, two very different monsters. The older brother, Uday, was impossible to ignore. Loud, impulsive, volatile. People who worked near him described his rage as something almost animalistic. He drove sports cars at dangerous speeds, wore designer suits, threw lavish parties, and carried weapons everywhere he went. But underneath all that flash was something genuinely terrifying. He had no restraint whatsoever. In October 1988, at a private party in Baghdad, Uday beat Saddam's personal valet, a man named Kamal Hana Gageo, to death with a club in front of witnesses. His crime? On him introducing Saddam to a woman who later became his second wife. Uday considered it a betrayal of his mother. Saddam briefly imprisoned him and sent him to Switzerland, but the punishment evaporated fast. Being Saddam's son meant the rules simply didn't apply. Uday also ran the Iraqi Olympic Committee. On paper, it sounded like a sports role. In reality, athletes who lost were reportedly beaten, humiliated, and imprisoned. Football players who gave poor performances reportedly faced detention at facilities connected to sites like the Al-Radwaniyah complex near Baghdad. Sports became one more weapon in the arsenal of terror. Qusay was the opposite, and in many ways, that made him more dangerous. He rarely spoke in public. He didn't need flashy titles or headlines. He quietly burrowed into the deepest parts of Iraq's security machine. By the late 1980s, he had worked his way into the Republican Guard, Saddam's elite fighting force, and later gained authority over the Special Security Organization, the unit personally responsible for protecting Saddam and eliminating internal threats. When the 1991 uprisings broke out across Iraq following the Gulf War, Qusay helped coordinate the brutal crackdown. Tanks, helicopter gunships, entire neighborhoods leveled, thousands dead. In October 2000, Saddam officially named Qusay Deputy Commander of the Armed Forces, a clear public signal that this was the man being groomed as successor. Uday never received that signal. The rivalry between the brothers was real, and it was cold. The world changes overnight. Then came March 20th, 2003. The United States-led coalition invaded Iraq. Airstrikes lit up Baghdad. Coalition ground forces swept north from Kuwait. Within 3 weeks, Iraqi defenses had crumbled. On April 9, 2003, Saddam's statue in Firdos Square was toppled in front of television cameras broadcast around the world. Saddam vanished, and so did Uday and Qusay. The U.S. military launched one of the most intense manhunts in modern history. They created a now legendary deck of 55 playing cards, each one featuring a most wanted face from the former regime. Saddam was the ace of spades. Qusay was the ace of clubs, number 2 on the list. Uday was the ace of hearts, number 3. Every soldier on the ground in Iraq knew those faces by heart. The Pentagon put up rewards that would change lives. $15 million for information leading to Uday or Qusay. $30 million for Saddam himself. In a country crushed under decades of sanctions and war, where that kind of money was almost incomprehensible, it was only a matter of time before someone talked. July 22, 2003. The last morning on July 22, 2003, a walk-in informant approached U.S. forces in Mosul with something specific, an address. The house belonged to a wealthy businessman named Nawaf al-Zaydan. Later reports suggested he turned the brothers in after realizing exactly who was staying under his roof and calculating that harboring Saddam's sons was a death sentence either way. U.S. commanders didn't hesitate. The operation was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division under Major General David Petraeus. Roughly 200 soldiers surrounded the area. Bradley fighting vehicles blocked every exit. OH-58 Kiowa helicopters circled overhead. Snipers took positions. Special operations forces embedded with the assault teams. Inside that 2-story house, Uday Hussein, Qusay Hussein, Qusay's 14-year-old son, Mustafa, and a bodyguard named Abdul Samad al-Hadushi. They were armed. They had prepared defensive positions, and they had no intention of surrendering. At roughly 10 a.m., U.S. forces surrounded the building and issued demands to come out. The answer from inside was automatic weapons fire. What followed was one of the most intense urban firefights of the entire Iraq War. Soldiers returned fire with machine guns and grenade launchers. An early assault team tried to enter the building and was driven back by a wall of gunfire. The men inside were cornered, armed, and apparently willing to die rather than face capture. The battle lasted hours. At around 1 p.m., U.S. commanders escalated. 110 BGM-71 Tiao anti-tank missiles were fired from Humvee-mounted launchers directly into the building. Rockets punched through walls. Parts of the upper floor collapsed in fire and smoke. The structure was systematically torn apart. Then the gunfire stopped. U.S. soldiers moved through the wreckage carefully. They found Uday dead, Qusay dead, the bodyguard dead, and then, on the second floor, still gripping an AK-47, 14-year-old Mustafa Hussein, Qusay's son, also dead, killed by return fire when he opened up on soldiers entering the stairwell. Uday was 39 years old. Qusay was 37. The world didn't believe it. Within 24 hours, U.S. military officials confirmed the identities using facial recognition, dental records, and DNA analysis. For American commanders, it was a massive psychological blow against the remnants of the old regime. But inside Iraq, nobody believed it. For decades, Saddam's government had pumped out state propaganda so thick that ordinary Iraqis had stopped trusting any official announcement, including this one. Rumors spread from Baghdad to Tikrit to Basra within hours. Some people claimed the brothers had escaped through tunnels. Others said the Americans had killed body doubles, a tactic the regime was known to use for high-profile public appearances. Without physical proof that the average Iraqi could see with their own eyes, the myth of Uday and Qusay could survive, and with it, the resistance. The leaked footage that shocked the world. 2 days after the battle, on July 24, 2003, and the Pentagon made a historic decision: release the photographs. Mortuary specialists had partially reconstructed the faces to make them identifiable. The photos were shown at a press briefing in Baghdad, then broadcast worldwide. Even so, the damage from bullets and explosions was clearly visible. The goal was ruthless and deliberate: destroy the myth. Break the idea that Saddam's circle was still intact. Prove beyond any doubt that these men were gone. Then additional footage began to circulate. Footage that was never part of the official Pentagon release. Video shot inside a medical facility showed close-up views of the brothers' bodies from multiple angles. Medical staff could be seen cleaning wounds and preparing the remains. The damage was far more graphic than the official photographs. U.S. EU officials stated they had not authorized the release of any additional material, but in a war zone packed with cameras, contractors, translators, and local workers, containing information was nearly impossible. The footage spread across Arab satellite television within days, reaching millions of households across Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and the Gulf states simultaneously. In parts of Baghdad and southern Iraq, people gathered around televisions in shops and watched in silence. Some celebrated openly. In areas around Tikrit, there was anger. Human rights organizations condemned the release. Amnesty International questioned whether showing the dead respected basic human dignity. U.S. military officials countered that without proof, insurgents would exploit the uncertainty to recruit and attack. The debate never fully resolved. What came after, the bodies of Uday and Qusay were eventually returned to family members and buried in Tikrit under heavy security. Saddam himself remained hidden for months, but with Qusay gone, the man who had personally built and maintained his security infrastructure, the web protecting Saddam unraveled fast. On December 13, 2003, U.S. forces found him hiding in a narrow underground bunker near the town of Ad-Dar, south of Tikrit, the so-called spider hole. He didn't fire a shot. He was pulled out looking exhausted and disoriented. In 2006, Saddam Hussein was convicted of crimes against humanity and executed by hanging on December 30th. Uday and Qusay never saw a courtroom. They never faced a jury. Their story ended in a shattered house in Mosul. He buried under rubble and Tau missile strikes, brought down not by justice, but by a $15 million tip and 200 soldiers who refused to back down. That's the full, unfiltered story. Two of the most dangerous men on earth, gone in a single morning, their images broadcast to the world against every convention of war and dignity. If this kind of deep, no-holds-barred history is what you're here for, subscribe to Timeless World right now. Drop a comment below. Do you think releasing those photographs was the right call, or did it cross a line? I want to read every single response. We'll see you in the next one.